Andrew Jackson's legacy is confusing. He is celebrated as a distinguished war leader, yet he's held slaves, was responsible for the deaths of thousands of Native Americans, brought an economic downturn, and took a man's life. Known as Old Hickory, his turbulent journey ended in a presidency marked by controversial decisions, statements, and actions that many view as very problematic. This might be why some label him as America's most controversial great president. He signed the Order for the Trail of Tears. Only a year into his presidency, Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1880, leading to one of the darkest moments in American history. This act allowed the government to exchange Native American land in the South for a designated Indian colonization zone out west, now known as Oklahoma. While the Indian Removal Act didn't explicitly allow Jackson's government or the military to evict Native Americans from their ancestral territories, this grim reality ensued. By 1831, the Choctaw tribe became the first to embark on the harrowing Trail of Tears. This forced march to the new Indian Territory, without adequate food or provisions, resulted in the tragic loss of as many as 4,000 lives. One historian noted that some Choctaw individuals were even bound in chains and marched double file. He led brutal military campaigns against Native Americans. Following an intense military campaign in the Creek War, Jackson dictated the surrender terms for the Creek tribes. These conditions were harsh. The Creek were forced to give up approximately 23 million acres of their territory, an area large enough to encompass more than half of present-day Alabama and part of southern Georgia to the U.S. government. In the midst of the Seminole War, Jackson ordered his men to destroy crops, take women and children hostage, and deploy savage dogs. After this conflict concluded, he penned a letter to his wife, stating with a degree of pride, "I think I may say that the Indian War is at an end for the present. The enemy is scattered over the whole face of the earth, and at least one half must starve and die with disease." He earned his fortune enslaving others. The Hermitage's official website, a museum located on Jackson's estate in Tennessee, distinctly mentions, "In all reality, slavery was the source of Andrew Jackson's wealth." By the end of his life, Jackson was the owner of 161 slaves. Although he wasn't the first president to own slaves, Jackson's involvement in slavery was more direct. He actively participated in the domestic slave trade in 1790 that spanned from Virginia through Tennessee and reached as far as New Orleans. Disturbingly, when one of Jackson's slaves managed to flee his estate, Jackson issued a reward for their capture. Jackson offered a $1.50 reward and $10 extra for every 100 lashes a person will give to the amount of 300. He killed a man in a duel. Andrew Jackson's turbulent life was marked by many confrontations, one of which ended in a lethal duel. In 1806, due to a dispute related to horse racing, Charles Dickinson labeled Jackson as a coward and equivocator. In response, Jackson challenged him to a duel. When the moment came, Dickinson was the first to shoot, hitting Jackson in the chest and breaking his ribs. However, even injured, Jackson remained steadfast. Old Hickory took his time, so much that others questioned his honor after the fact, steadied himself, and fired a fatal shot. Jackson's history with violence and dueling was far from over. He would engage in more than 100 duels throughout his life. Interestingly, in one such incident, he severely injured himself attempting to hit another man with a horsewhip. This same man would later become one of Jackson's most trusted friends and a prominent ally in the Senate. He killed off fugitive slaves. During the Seminole War, the stakes were heightened by the alliance between Native Americans and escaped slaves. Future President Andrew Jackson was tasked with crushing this combined force. Florida, then under Spanish control, had become a sanctuary for escaped slaves. Many of these fugitives had congregated in an old British stronghold, commonly referred to as Negro Fort. Jackson directed his forces to obliterate the fort. The climax came when a U.S. gunboat fired a cannonball that struck the fort's gunpowder reserve, resulting in a devastating explosion that claimed the lives of 270 individuals inside. In time, Florida was integrated into the United States, bringing an end to its status as a refuge for escaped slaves. He caused an economic depression. Andrew Jackson harbored a deep hatred towards the Bank of the United States, and his later decisions in opposition to it started a countrywide economic downturn. In 1832, he took the drastic step of dismantling the Bank of the United States. Jackson chose to deposit government funds in select state or pet banks that were rather liberal with their lending, causing rampant inflation. He had a strong aversion to paper money and decided to tackle this issue head-on. On July 11, 1836, Jackson made a rule that people could only buy land using gold or silver, not paper money. This caused fewer people to buy land, which meant less money for the states. This problem grew and led to a big financial crisis called the Panic of 1837. He ruled New Orleans like a dictator. As the War of 1812 neared its conclusion, General Andrew Jackson arrived in New Orleans, discovering a city in chaos. Swiftly asserting his authority, Jackson imposed martial law, ensuring the city's stability throughout the war's duration. However, even after hostilities ceased, Jackson adamantly maintained martial law for several more months. A Louisiana state senator, voicing his concerns about the indefinite continuation of martial law, drew Jackson's anger. In response, Jackson had the senator detained. When a U.S. judge said the senator should be charged or released, Jackson's boldness was even clearer. He not only disregarded the judge's order, but also had the magistrate imprisoned. Subsequently, Jackson expelled him from New Orleans. He fired hundreds of government employees in favor of his friends. During his campaign, Andrew Jackson promised his main supporters jobs if he became president. But on the night he was inaugurated, so many people came to the White House looking for those jobs that it almost turned into a big fight. Even though Jackson said he wanted to stop corruption, he's known for a practice called the spoils system. This meant he fired a lot of current government workers and replaced them with his supporters. Right after becoming president, he fired 919 workers, which was a whopping 10% of all the government employees. In his first year, he also fired 423 mailmen, even though many had done their jobs well for a long time. He tried to outlaw abolitionist literature and said abolitionists deserve to die. When literature against slavery started spreading in the American South, Andrew Jackson, known for setting strict rules, tried to prohibit it. In the mid-1830s, abolitionists started distributing their messages to many homes in the South through mail. This sparked significant turmoil. Reacting to the influx of this literature and the unrest it was instigating, Jackson remarked, "I have read with great sorrow and regret that such men live in our happy country, I might have said monsters, as to be guilty of the attempt to stir up amongst the South the horrors of a servile war. They deserve to atone for this wicked attempt with their lives." In alignment with his sentiments, the Jackson administration prohibited the Postal Service from delivering any abolitionist material deemed inflammatory. He threatened to behead his vice president. Andrew Jackson and his first vice president, John Calhoun, frequently clashed, particularly over the nullification crisis in the early 1830s. This crisis arose when South Carolina, with Calhoun's backing, declared that they could nullify federal laws they deemed unconstitutional. Jackson, a staunch Unionist, opposed this. Their conflict escalated to the point where Jackson warned Calhoun, "John Calhoun, if you secede from my nation, I will secede your head from the rest of your body." This incident highlighted the tension-filled relationship between the president and his vice president, as well as the broader tensions leading up to the Civil War. He completely ignored a Supreme Court ruling. Andrew Jackson had a tricky relationship with the Supreme Court. When they agreed with him, he praised them, but when they didn't, he sometimes ignored their decisions. A famous example is the Worcester v. Georgia case in 1832. The Supreme Court said Georgia couldn't just take land from the Cherokee Native Americans because it had gold. Jackson wanted that gold. He responded, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." While historians are not 100% sure Jackson said this, we do know that he and Georgia didn't listen to the court. They took the Cherokee land and its gold anyway. He gambled away his grandfather's inheritance. At 16, Jackson received a considerable inheritance from his late grandfather, but he didn't manage it well. He quickly spent the £300 to £400 sterling from his wealthy Irish grandfather on his well-known passions, gambling and racehorses. Within a year, the money was all gone. He let the White House get trashed after his inauguration. In 1829, when Jackson became president, a large crowd showed up at the White House on the day he was inaugurated. At first, his close supporters came, hoping to talk to him about the jobs he promised them. But then, many more people came. These people partied hard. They drank a lot, broke furniture, and even stomped cheese into the carpets. A lady at the event said it was chaotic, with people everywhere causing trouble. Jackson had to sneak out of the back window to avoid the mess. Later, he asked Congress for $50,000 to fix up the White House after the wild party. As history unravels the layers of Andrew Jackson's actions, the intricate tapestry of the past comes alive. Watch our next video diving deep into another controversial figure. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time.